All right, Phil
Are you ready
Nichols.
for my list?
Someone it was I think it was Keaton Callens this week on
Yep.
Facebook came out
Yep.
and shared the top 5 players at your school. Of course, we're talking about Guthrie High School, and it has been a great run of athletes, especially from 2000 on. But also in the early 90s, there was a lot of great athletes. Middle of the 80s was great as well. There's a long
Great
line of
players
athletes,
in the 70s. Yeah.
but it seemed to really take up a different level around 2000 and so on. So that's how this list came up, and a lot of people. The list was actually your top 5 players.
Yeah,
and
which I refuse to do.
I did have my top 5, and I didn't go back for it because I think number 1 for me that I've seen, and I will say this, I did not see Mitchell Iffy Pierce in 1985. He was an All-American. So I honestly I've heard all about it, and I've seen a few highlights, and they are awesome. And if you're an All-American, I don't care if it's Phil Nichols All-American team, you're still an All-American.
Can
so
we
I
do
didn't
that?
see him.
Could we start Phil Nichols All-American team?
Give me $1 million and we'll get that started. All right.
We're in a recession, Chris.
Okay.
I'll give you $20.
And a Sonic drink.
Yes, Route 44.
Ooh.
All right.
I will say this before your top 20. I went with my number 1 player that I've seen. I went with Cantrell Brothers. The numbers on offense were crazy. The numbers on defense were crazy. And had a great college career in the NFL. Doesn't look like it's going to be with the Minnesota Vikings. Moving on, they got somebody. Right. They picked up a linebacker this week. Yeah. So
he'll be moving on somewhere.
Yeah, he's a stud on special teams, and someone will pick him up. But my number 1 player, Cantrell Brothers. And in my back pocket, I don't know if you were on the interview with me or not, Phil, but I asked Gary Rose, the Hall of Famer, Carl Albert head football coach, and I asked him, who is the one Guthrie football player that you had the hardest time game planning for? And without hesitation, he said Cantrell Brothers. Because I don't know if he made Cantrell Brothers. I don't know if he made Cantrell Brothers on the offensive side of the ball or on the defensive side of the ball or all of it. But that, and again, there's a lot of players. I'm going with that because of numbers. I mean, he had 16 sacks in the state of Oklahoma. He had 5 in week 1 against Duncan's left tackle that went to the University of Oklahoma. And then he had 1,000 yards receiving, and everybody knew he was going to get the ball. And then when it came down to clutch time, he ran the football over in Duncan. Doesn't know how to put a knee down, but anyway. That's my number 1 overall player. Kai Staley has to be somewhere in that 2, probably for me. But after that, after that. So anyway, all right, Phil.
Well, I think
here we go.
Well, I want to say this. Real quick before I give my list. But
yes,
I've got a story as well that came from Rob Hudson. Rob was telling the story that back when the 07 team, which, many of us believe is the best team that ever came through, and now my 02 guys are going to start piling on. But anyway, he was telling a story about he went up to him because Rafe would work the tennis tournaments with Mary, head tennis coach Mary Hudson. And he said, well, who's our best running back, or who's something like that. And he said, well, our best running back, we don't play there because we don't have to. And this is what I go back to. I feel a little bit cheated because we never got to see Josh King on the offensive side of the ball consistently get touches. I think if Josh had had the opportunity to play on both sides of the ball like Kenny did, I think the numbers, because I think defensively what Josh did was as good as anybody that's ever played in Guthrie. Special teams, he was as good as anybody that's ever played at Guthrie. And I think if he'd been given an opportunity to play on the offensive side of the ball, I think he'd put up yards that would freak you out. But now everybody knows I'm a little partial in that conversation, but that's coming from Rafe Watkins. Rafe also said that Josh King was the best pure football player he ever coached. So those are strong words from the guy that worked with him every day, that coached. I'm just sharing that because those are the comments that were shared with me and around people. saying that,
real quick, the only
I've got to
go.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go roll back to Contrell. Contrell had all the numbers, but he was sandwiched in between the state championship teams, the 07 team before he got there, and then the 2011 state championship team. He was in the middle of
Never got a
that.
ring.
Never got a ring.
Never got a ring. Made the semis, 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah, remember
Made the semis, but never.
that his senior year ran into that very good Booker T. Washington team, beat us over at Stillwater, over in Stillwater, and Booker T. Washington had that Bishop Kelly kid move in, I think it was, and they who's the receiver for Seattle now?
It's one of the K-State kid. His dad played there, uncle played there, grandpa played there, everybody played at K-State, but I'm Lockett.
Yes. Yeah.
Lockett.
He was on that team. He was
Lockett
okay.
kid. Yeah. He was pretty good.
He didn't even stand out on that team. I mean, he did, but he wasn't. I don't remember him being the best. Yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. No, there was a lot of freaks. Same thing to be said about that 02 Booker T team that the Blue Jays beat for the state title. I mean, they had 2 future number 1 round draft picks on that team, and I think 3 or 4 guys that were superstars at the D1 level. I mean, they were.
Yeah, they had.
Or
Robert
was it
Meacham.
one? They had one. Robert Meacham, and then the running back that went to Dallas out of Arkansas.
Felix Jones.
One pick also. Felix Jones. And then they had the Cheney kid, right? Wasn't it Cheney?
Went to OU.
OU, big, tall, long, wide receiver. And then they had probably 5 other kids that were studs as well. But so this is my top 20 in no order, Christopher.
All right.
And you're going to know it's no order because I'm going to start with one. But this is no order. I'm going to mix them up. I'm going to go number 20, Donovan Jordan. Okay. I'm going backwards. I'm going to jump around.
Donovan Jordan,
this
also
is in
known
no
as.
order, though.
Hold on. I like to comment every now and then.
Okay, go ahead.
Donovan Jordan, Spider-Man. The one play I won't forget is that grab he had in, I think it was semifinals over. Was it the state championship?
Yeah.
Semifinals.
Well, he had a great catch in the back of the end zone at O State, and he about gave himself a concussion, or he did. Still played the game, but he was a two-way player. Rick Michaud, who coached all the great wide receivers we've had come out of here at one point, said that Donovan had as good a hands as anybody that's ever played at Guthrie. And he was a great defensive back and played special teams and was a tough football player. So, a lot of fun.
War jersey 26. Okay.
Spider-Man. All right, Luke Davis. Luke Davis is on my list. Luke's was a
for offense or
never
defense?
came off the field. He played everything.
1,700-yard rusher.
Teams of that, Chris. Yeah, and a team leader on defense, multi-year starter, all-stater, played college football up in Chicago area, just a stud. Israel Esco, who was, in my opinion, the best cornerback. Well, I'm going to stop short of that. He's one of the 2 best cornerbacks I've ever seen play at Guthrie that I've seen, okay, and was a freak on offense. He just got out overshadowed because that 07 team had so many other great players. A lot of times some of these kids get overshadowed, but Israel was a freak.
Yeah, Israel, a great athlete. I think he might have allowed maybe 5 catches all season long, and he was just that shutdown corner.
An animal. He's so physical. And then on the offensive side of the ball, if he didn't happen to be playing with 2 other guys that are on my top 20 list, they would have been he would have been a number 1 receiver in most years, but which leads me to my next pick, Kent McDonald, big wide receiver, just dominant. Nobody could guard him. When we got down inside the 30, Keaton had just, you just throw that ball up in the corner and he'd just go get it. I mean, you just couldn't do anything with him.
Kent McDonald
kid. Went on to a great career at Northwestern and played arena football for several years, but a great player.
Yeah, nicknamed
Keenan
Fred.
Webb.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Fred.
Yeah,
Fred. Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, okay. You're getting into it.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Also, a very good basketball
Your world,
player.
I'm just in it.
And 2-time basketball state
player.
Champion as well. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, Phil. Go ahead.
Yeah. Keenan Webb, who's a freak in all aspects of the of the game, didn't play a lot of organized football until he got into high school, based on some comments I've seen on Facebook. great return guy, just a great football player. So Keenan would definitely be in my top 20.
Keenan Webb, I will never forget Keenan Webb, 2002. We were on the road at Tulsa East Central, came up with a huge catch and got basically thrown into the track where there was just a big puddle of water, and he was just soaked. It was one of those iconic plays that I remember in my mind doing the radio call, because when every single time we played Tulsa East Central, I'm like, well, it was a good year. I mean, they're really good. Maybe not 07, but like this East Central team's really, really good. And, we had a good year. Look at these athletes. There's no way we can do it, especially the 09 East Central team, the Corbin Crockett game, if you remember that one. But anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Next pick is Josh King. I mean, I've already talked about Josh. He's
never heard of him.
Well, yeah, never heard of him. I mean, just, and many people would say he's the best that they saw play defense. There's great players out there, but Josh is definitely one of them.
My Josh King story, there's a bunch of them, but my favorite one is the 07 state semifinals at Putnam City against Tulsa East Central. And the East Central punter actually punted the ball in the air to Josh, and a well-known high school football coach who was watching the game, as soon as the ball was in the air, the coach goes, uh-oh. and then Josh King gets the ball, and Kenny Sessions, who was stud in his own right, and everyone would talk about him in the state, he was coming full force at Josh, and Josh went left, went right, left, and Kenny Sessions was there looking at the snow falling down as Josh King ran by him. So that's one of my favorite Josh King moments.
Yeah, that same game because remember, that was a pretty good ball game up until the first half, and then the same coach, because remember it started snowing that game. It was cold and all this, and when they did that same coach leaned forward to his assistant coach. They had ridden over together, and he said, "Go start the van." This game's over. So it was. They ended up hanging 40-some points on them and just blowing them out. But Kentrell brothers, obviously, I mean, there's not a whole lot that we can say that hasn't been said about Kentrell over the years. I mean, he's just a freak of nature. Anything you want to say about Kentrell before you yell at me for moving on?
No, I think I got my words in on Kentrell earlier.
Okay. All right. Now, the next guy on my list is who I think is the most athletic guy I've ever seen, not just in Guthrie, but in any high school I've ever been around.
I'm writing these down. Okay, so that's Chris Evans. Yeah. Thank you for Phil. Appreciate that. Most athletic.
You're welcome.
Football or basketball? We're talking about football. My football. Okay. Got Chris
football,
Evans. Okay.
But this guy did it all. Dante Foster, obviously, is one of the greatest, and I think he is the most athletic individual that's ever came out of Guthrie High School. Now, I know there's great arguments for Freddie Mulder. I know there's great arguments out there. Believe me, I get that. I love to tell the story about one of my old coaches, Mike Pitko, when I was a kid growing up in Kansas. He played professional baseball with Mr. Mulder. And growing up, anytime we'd get a little cocky, he'd always look at us and go, "Ain't none of you Freddie Mulder." And we'd go, "Who the daylights is Freddie Mulder?" And then years later, I moved to Guthrie, Oklahoma, and I'm at a restaurant, and I hear one of my all-time favorite Guthrie people, Holly Chappell, bring up the name of Freddie Mulder, and I'm like, whoa. You talking about the Freddie Mulder?
Yeah.
So, and then I got to meet him not too long after that, so it's a small world, but Dante's freak football player, obviously what he did in high school. Then he goes on to Ohio and sets all the receiving records at Ohio, was team captain at Ohio, was with the Vikings practice squad. I mean, he's just a freak. You could also make an argument that he's the best basketball player, one of the best basketball players, I should say, to ever come out of Guthrie. And then you would also can make a very strong argument that he was one of the most decorated track athletes to ever come out of Guthrie, obviously 7-foot high jumper and multiple state titles in track. So, but he's on my list. Anything you want to say about Dante?
No, you wrapped it up well. I have, of course, with Dante, some of the highlights for me is the catch, the shot, and all the state championships. And he was a freshman on the basketball team, and I think I don't even think we had a winning record, and he still led them to the state tournament that year. And it's just the catch at McGinnis, and then you had the shot at the Carl Albert tournament that both made ESPN highlights. So it's amazing.
Yeah, just a great guy. My next guy on the list is for this generation, as far as the state title runs, he was the leader of the pack, DeMarco Jones. He was a kid that was always, he'd get hit. I'm not saying he'd pick up 3 more yards after contact every time. He just was always falling forward, so elusive, played both sides of the ball. The state championship game, they matched him up against, I believe it was the Meacham kid, and he just shut him down. On the defensive side of the ball. DeMarco is a complete freak. He's a guy that could play any position you asked him to on the football field, any of the skilled positions, and would have been the best at that position probably, or one of the best in the state for sure. He'd have been a freak at wide receiver if we had somebody that could have thrown the ball to him, right? But just a great athlete and just an animal. So no doubt DeMarco's got to be on that list.
Absolutely. He was the jersey number 4, the quarterback for the 02 state championship team, and just it was a force. And the 02 team, and we always have the argument between 07 and 02, but 02, that playoff schedule that they went through when Ardmore walked into that first round, I was like, wow. You always hear about Ardmore, and then Chickasha down at OU, and then Booker T. Washington, and it was a heck of a playoff run.
Well, and that was a team that was early in Rafe's tenure here, and man, I'm telling you, they didn't catch lightning in a bottle. They were a great team, so it wasn't like they got lucky. I think they came out of nowhere because early in that season they had lost those 2 ball games, and I think they were still trying to figure some things out, and players were trying to figure some things out. But man, when the after those first 3 or 4 games, they were so good, and you're right, the competition in that state championship run into the playoffs in 02 was something. It was unbelievable. I'm gonna bring in a few of my favorite players on the field, some of my big uglies. The next 3 I'm going to list were linemen. Kyle Smith is definitely on my top 20 list. Kyle's, he's just, great career here, went to New Mexico, had a great college career, and just a great guy, but an absolute stud. And then you lined him up next to the next guy I'm going to talk about here in a second, and it was unbelievable. But your thoughts on Kyle Smith?
Yeah, Kyle Smith just into the Guthrie High School Hall of Fame. Of course, he was he's kind of the spokesperson for the 2002 state championship team. So if anybody gets if there's a celebration or a 02 football team going to the Hall of Fame, Guthrie High School Hall of Fame, Kyle is the spokesperson of that football team, and I think he always will be that as well. Just a big body up front, and he's a big part of again that playoff run. I mentioned Ardmore, Tall C Central. Again, you can't brag enough on all the Tall C Central teams that Guthrie has ever gone up against. And then of course Chickasha and Ardmore, or Chickasha and Booker T. Washington. But Kyle, he was a force, and it's one of those deals, Phil. The 02 team started all this. 07 kind of knocked the door down. But if there was some other stud that was in Kyle Smith's spot in 02, and then Kyle Smith comes around 07, 09, 10, 06, when Guthrie starts to get the reputation of producing athletes, I think he would have got even higher scholarship offers than what he still went Division I, still played Division I, which is still big time. Yeah. But I think those offers
started 4 years.
Yeah. So I think those offers would have been even more so if Guthrie's reputation had gotten to the level that it had.
Yeah, there's a few people on my list that what you just said would apply to. My next guy is Big Dave Washington. Obviously, played with Kyle on that 02 championship team, and is a stud, and then goes over to OSU and is a complete stud at OSU. Then he was with I think he tried out or had opportunities in the
he's
NFL with Seattle and and just, I mean, his record speaks for itself. Just a great football player.
Yeah, David Washington. There's been so many great athletes, but David Washington during the big run for Guthrie during all those years was the first guy from Guthrie that you saw play big-time Division I football, especially at Oklahoma State. So when you turn it on and you watch Oklahoma State, you're like, well, now OSU really has to win because David's on there, and you're like, he's in a shotgun. You're like, okay, the snap's good. Okay, good. The snap's good to go. All right. And so you watch a little bit closer as you see one of your guys playing Division I football. Of course, we'll get to Kai Staley here in a little bit. That was the same thing, Controlled Brothers, But David Washington was that first D1 player that went through the program here in Guthrie, and then you got to watch on the big level in college football. And so it was always fun to watch David at Oklahoma State.
Yeah, stud, just a great player and a great kid. I guess they're not kids anymore. Fine man. But my next one, I'm going to stay with the big uglies. Blake Belcher. Blake Belcher is, for my money, deserves to be on this list. Great career here in Guthrie. Scott Mick, who's the offensive line coach as well as the offensive coordinator for those great teams. He always talked about just being meaner than a junkyard dog, and he was. He was a bully out there. Then went on and had a great career at Tulsa. But so Blake's on my top 20 list as well.
My one quick Blake story. Dunking at the Family Life Center is my Blake Belcher story.
Ended with a broken foot, I believe.
Yes. And a few unhappy coaches.
Yeah, it wasn't a real good day for Blaker. My next guy on this list is a guy that I think falls into that category you described. If he had had an opportunity for Guthrie to have gotten on the map a little bit more from a recruiting standpoint, you would have seen this gentleman play at a big-time program, and that's Robert Harmon. Robert was a complete monster at defensive end for the Blue Jays, and so he's on my top 20 list as well.
Robert Harmon's a Oklahoma Highway Patrol trooper, so I have nothing but good things to say about Robert Harmon.
Great player, obviously. The next one for me is, and this guy is way up there, just as just great players, is Landry Chappell. Landry, just a stud.
Is it Chappell or Chappelle? I can't remember. Is it Chappelle?
I think only those of us that live in Guthrie know how to pronounce it correctly. But Landry would be one of my top 20 players as well. Dominant defensive player. Everybody's talked about how tough he was, and believe me, he was. That cat could run. A lot of people don't remember how well he covered sideline to sideline. He was so fast on the field. Just a great player. So Landry's definitely in my top 20 as well.
I'm pulling up some numbers real quick. I only have a few selected numbers, and I know I have some on Landry Chappell. Where are they at? Okay, here we are, Phil. 2011, he had 164 tackles, 12 sacks. In 2010, he had 178 tackles, 5 sacks, 2 interceptions. 2009, Landry had 170 tackles, 7 sacks, and 1 interception. In 2008, he had 75 tackles. So, as a four-year player for the Blue Jays, he had 587 tackles. And when we say tackles in Guthrie, there were some years in Deer Creek where one guy would have 755 tackles in 1 week of football games, but Guthrie did the right way to grade it. And
real numbers.
587 career tackles.
Yeah, it's crazy. So Landry's on my list. I wrestled because we've had some great linebackers through here that aren't going to be on my list. But since my wife said I could have a couple honorable mentions, they made it on my honorable mention list.
Oh, okay. Well, we still need number 15 here.
So. I know.
Okay. Your disclaimer.
I'm positioning.
Yes.
I'm positioning. Elliott Curry obviously has to be on this top 20 list. If the list would be invalid without Elliott on there. Great two-way player for the Blue Jays. Great college career, still playing. Was I think top 16 or 8 finalist for the Division II version of the Heisman this past year. Yep. And one of those great athletes. So Elliott's made some unbelievable catches. I mean, he was great on defense. I remember some games they'd drop him, BB would drop him back to safety, on defense, because he knew that they weren't going to be able to get behind him, and they knew if he threw the ball up, he'd either go pick it or knock it down. I mean, he was just such a competitor and athlete. So Elliott's definitely on my list.
Elliott Curry, a lot of people would have him if you had to go to a top 5 list. A lot of people would make the argument for Elliott Curry just because of his offensive and defensive numbers. He was he's one of the sharp dressed Guthrie Blue Jays of all time, and another great athlete on the basketball court as well. And Elliott Curry definitely up there. And again, there's a big argument for him to be even in the top 5, just the way he can do it offensively and defensively.
Yeah, there is. My next one on the list is the first All-American for Guthrie, Iffy Pierce. I do put him on my list simply because I've talked to enough guys that have watched him play football over the years, that have watched all the different kids we're talking about, and they always bring Iffy up. I'm like you. I've seen a few highlight things here and there, and they were special. And he's a wonderful, wonderful man today. It's just been I've absolutely loved Iffy. I just love him. Just doing great things in Lawton with his church and doing a lot of great things. But Iffy Pierce, I think if it would be, if he's not on this list, it completely, the list loses all credibility.
Yeah. So 1985 All-American, went on to play football over at Langston, and he tells a story, and I won't go into it deep, but one of my favorite stories is needing some shoes from Mr. Holly Chappell, and somehow those shoes got delivered right before the football game. But that's one of my favorite Iffy stories.
How many sets of cleats, basketball shoes, baseball gloves, tennis rackets, golf clubs do you think the Chappell family's provided to kids over the years?
I don't know, but Iffy tells a story awesome on that one. So there's a bunch of them, but Iffy has the best story. So well, maybe we can share that another day.
No doubt he does. He loved Mr. Chappell, no doubt. Next guy on my list, obviously one of the no-brainers, Kai Staley, our second All-American at Guthrie, player of the year for the state of Oklahoma, recruited by literally everybody in the country. Had a tremendous career at Oklahoma State. If he doesn't destroy his knee, I think that Kai was destined to play in the NFL as a tailback. But it speaks to his competitive spirit and his determination that even after suffering what all the medical doctors described as one of the most gruesome knee injuries they've ever seen, he comes back and starts multiple years for the Oklahoma State Cowboys, made all Big 12 second team 3 years in a row, I believe, 2 or 3 years in a row, and still got an opportunity to go. I believe it's to the Titans camp, or got invited, but his knee was just destroyed. And Mike Gundy, there was a group of us that went over and toured the Oklahoma State facilities back a few years ago. And when Coach Gundy came out and met us to talk to us for a few minutes, and when he found out we were all from Guthrie, the first two, of course, obviously talked about David, and he talked about Kai. And he said Kai at the end of his career, and Kai's so humble and quiet, he doesn't ever talk about this stuff. He said, there was, at the end of his career, he couldn't hardly practice because the knee would swell up so bad. So there was a lot of times he was just over on the bike, just riding the bike, just to, so he could play in the games. But so tough and such a great athlete, and really a shame on what happened with his knee, because we just won't ever really know what he could have done. Even though he had a great career at Oklahoma State as well, I think it could have been one of those all-time great players over there if he hadn't got hurt.
Yeah, Kai Staley, and I think this is probably maybe the biggest compliment you can give Kai Staley in that 2007 state championship football team, who absolutely had studs all over the field. I mean, you talk about Israel Esco could have done this on offense, and Josh King could have done this on offense. And this, how many first downs they allowed, how many points they allowed. But Kai Staley was the face of the '07 state championship football team. And with all those studs around, I mean, he's the face. And you kind of forget about the numbers, but he almost ran for 1,400 yards. He threw for 625 yards. He had 10 catches for 320 yards. He ended up with 42 touchdowns combined just his senior year, not counting all the other years. He only threw one interception in that season. But he was the face of it. And I tell you what, Carl Albert sold out, and it was a classic game. I mean, you talk about how stud '07 football team was, but they snuck out of Midwest City that day with the victory. Yep. And their game plan 100% was to stop Kai Staley, and they did. Luckily for us, that '07 team was just loaded and can overcome that. But that's just
our '07 team were able to trot out a guy who's on my honorable mention list, Keaton Callens.
Oh, honorable mention. I was waiting for him to put him in there. We got discussions here in a minute, Phil Nichols.
I know that. I know that. And I know that. But when you hear the rest of my players, you're going to understand why. But I think if Keaton wasn't playing behind, because people don't remember, he really only got he got to start 1 year. Keaton got to start 1 year.
And that was a good team, too.
If Keaton great team. Got robbed at Booker T. If Keaton had been able to play 2 or 3 years at quarterback, he would have set passing records that would still stand today. There's no doubt about it.
All right, we'll talk about Keaton here in a minute.
Sorry. But it tears my heart out that he's not on my top 20. But,
I can tell.
My next guy is Keaton's little brother, Kai Callens, who obviously has to be on the list. Kai is a 4-year starter on defense. He had a huge number of interceptions as a freshman playing cornerback in 5A football. Again, unfortunately, because of knee injuries, 2-time MVP in state championship games, 2-time state champion. If he doesn't get hurt his junior year, I think there's a real possibility we're talking about a three-peat, and I think we're talking about then, because there's people that will make an argument that Kai Callens is definitely in the top 5. I mean, and that's a strong argument. You can make that argument very, very strongly.
Absolutely.
But I don't know if there's been a more at the high school level. I mean, on both sides of the ball, what he did was unreal, and he was before he started having his problems with his knees, which continued on to his college career. And I mean, it's just been terrible. But he's one of those kids you feel cheated because there was more there, right? There was more there after high school, and we didn't get to see it. But he was an absolute just stud, and so obviously he's on my top 20 and would be much higher than number 20 for those that are wondering on my list.
Right. Yeah, Phil's randomly throwing out the numbers. Didn't want to put anybody in order, but Kai Callens. The bigger the game was, the bigger he played. And I'll never forget this play either. It was over. It had to be over in Sapulpa against who was that against? The halfback pass to Dutton, or the Kai's pass to Dutton. I cannot remember. In Sapulpa we played. The win game. The win game.
Who were we playing that game? How do we not remember that, Evans? That's terrible.
It's kind of embarrassing.
There's people yelling. There's people yelling at us right now that know the name of it.
I got to go to my cheat sheet. McAllister.
Thank you.
Guthrie won that game 28-20. Phil.
Yeah, that's right.
Right here in front of me.
Okay.
Right. Guthrie won that game 28-25. It was Sapulpa. It was a day game too, by the way. Very windy. But that pass to Dutton, which was in the air forever. I didn't know if it was ever going down, but it secured the win that day. Thank you, Tina. Tina got it.
Baker just said.
Clayton Baker is incorrect on that one.
Clayton Baker said Collinsville. Yeah.
Well, Tina Smith said McAllister.
You got backed up. Well, you got backed up by athletic director John Chappell as well.
And I'm looking at dead in I got the notes here.
Yeah, I got you. All right. So okay. I'm down to my last 2.
Correct. Let's see here.
Right? Yeah, I'm down to my last 2.
me see. I'm gonna see if I have. Oh, here's desktop. Let me see it right here. Okay, it's gonna be kind of hard to see here, Phil. But this is my little database here. This is for the Rafe Watkins tenure. The Reds are losses; those aren't good. The Blacks are the wins there. But so this is from 01. Let's see here. 07. Yeah, there's no red in the. Go see. There's no red in the 07.
Yeah, no red there. No red in. I believe 11 or 14 either, right?
Correct. Yeah, there's 2002, Phil.
Okay, so I could not remember who they lost to. So they lost to Shawnee
week 1,
25-14, and they
on the
lost
road
to Douglas 41. Okay. All right. Yep. I just didn't. And you know, and again, I think the thing that always separates for me. Well, we don't have to talk about that because I'll go for 20 minutes.
That's okay, but during that tenure from 01 to 13, Phil, Guthrie was 133-30 overall. Let's see here. They were trying to go over. They were 11-1 during home playoff games. They were 4-1 in day games. They were 3-1 in overtime. They were. How about this? Their record in December, 4-0. They were 11-2 in home. 11-2 in homecoming games. They were 13-0 on senior night games, and that was kind of the height of TV. Guthrie was 13-3 during those seasons when they played in front of a TV audience. So those were pretty good numbers. Of course, 9-4 against Carl Albert, 7-2 against Deer Creek. So anyway, those are my numbers here in my Rafe Watkins time. So.
Yep. All right, my last two. My next guy is Russell Rush. Great football player, linebacker, kind of did it all. Of course, everybody, the folklore is the left-legged punt, that went for 60-some yards. You always hear about.
It's a nice one, but
yeah,
but it's not.
Give me your best Russell Rush.
Which one do you want?
Best Russell Rush story.
He had a couple. He had a couple kicks against Carl Albert that a lot of people will remember in his neck of the woods. Linebacker, tough. So,
tough kid. Yeah,
you can't forget the game-winning field
Russell's
goals.
on there for me. Yeah. And my number the last one I'm saying, but he is not number 20 either, is Brian Dutton. Again, I don't know how you'd keep Brian Dutton off this list. 4-year starter at quarterback. I think he lost, 8 games in his career, 7 or 8 games.
I got it right here. Stand by.
Is that right? Okay. For me, and if you didn't get to watch him as a freshman and the absolute pounding this kid took, absolutely one of the toughest kids that's ever strapped it on in Guthrie. You can say that about a lot of these guys on here, but Brian just took a beating and just kept going. Just so physically tough and mentally tough, and a great competitor. I mean, he was that guy that would just will his team and his way to a victory. I mean, he was just a phenomenal competitor. Another great 3-sport stud, much like Landry Chappell, much like Dante Foster. There's very few 2-sport studs, and there's even less 3-sport studs that you can ever talk about. And there's at least 3 or 4 of them on this list that were studs in multiple sports. So Brian Dutton is my final one on the top 20.
One of my favorite things about Brian Dutton, and there's many of them. I'll start off here. I remember his very first game was with Bishop McGinnis, and I felt so sorry for him because he just kept getting pounded and pounded. He just kept getting sacked and after sack after sack, and somehow he kept picking himself up, and I don't know how. And when he was getting hit from behind, from straight on, from every direction, and that's after that game, I was like, man, this kid, he's a freshman, by the way. So that stuff was tough. So okay, so the thing Brian Dutton, I will never forget this number, is Brian Dutton was a 4-year quarterback for the Blue Jays. If Brian Dutton went to the state championship game all 4 years, that would be 14 games. So the maximum of games that he could play, or anybody in this time of era, is 56 games. That's the total max. If everything goes well, which there's a lot of Carl Albert kids right now who are doing that. But anyway, right. 56 games is the most you can ever play in, and Brian Dutton played in 52 of those games. So he was only cheated 4 games in his high school career.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Oh, by the way, he was 43-9 in those games, including his freshman year when they were 8-5.
Exactly.
So he only lost 4 games in the last 3 years as a starting quarterback.
Yeah. I mean, he's just a freak. I mean, just an absolute freak. Real quick, we don't have to go into a lot of discussion, but I do want to throw my honorable mentions out there. And there's a lot of guys. This list could be long. I'm not going to add everybody on it, but Keaton obviously is on my honorable mentions list. I know he would be on your top 20 list, Chris.
Keaton Cowens, real quick.
William Moore.
I got Keaton Cowens, one of my favorite players of all time in Guthrie uniform, football and basketball. Anytime, I'll never forget Keaton Cowens coming in against Carl. I remember Gary Rose and defensive coach. I can't remember his name. Had the game plan to stop Kai Staley, and they did. I mean, Kai was going backwards, and you're like, oh my gosh, here's one of the best teams in the state, and still can't overcome Carl Albert. Although we beat Carl Albert every year, it's not going to happen against our good team. But Keaton Cowens, I never forget, came in on 3rd down off the bench and threw a pass in the far right corner to find Kent McDonald. I don't know if it was to give us the lead at the time or not, but. And then Keaton Cowens was huge on the basketball court with big shots. Of course, it was Dante's team that everyone talked about. But Keaton Cowens had so many big plays when things weren't going. When all the teams that could stop the running game, there was Keaton Cowens able to throw the football, and he had some huge shots in basketball. One of my favorite passes from Keaton Cowens is Casey and I were calling the area basketball championship, and we were at Carl Albert, and I can't remember who we were playing, and we were broadcasting behind the basketball goal. For some reason we couldn't get in the middle, but Keaton got a steal, I think it was, and Dante was behind him, and I remember my radio call said, "Oh, throw it off the glass," and there he did. He threw it off the glass. Dante caught it off the glass and dunked it. I mean, it was amazing how I saw that. I was just like, oh yeah, throw it off the glass. That'd be kind of cool. And then he does it. He was cool like that.
Smooth, man.
Yeah, he was.
He was Guthrie's version of Magic Johnson. He was just smooth.
Yeah,
he was just smooth. I mean, great player. But my honorable mentions: Keaton, Jonathan Washington, who some people could argue should be on there on the top 20. William Morgan, who was a complete monster at linebacker. I had a hard time with these. And then the one I'm going to say that may not be popular, but if we're going to keep it real based on athleticism and results, and he would probably be on my top 20 list if it wasn't for some recent things, is Elton Rhodes. Elton was he was a dog on the football field. There was no doubt. To me, Williams, one of the best linebackers we've ever had. Keaton's obviously wrong place, wrong time, but still one of the greatest we've ever had. J-Dub could run like no other. I mean, Jonathan was so athletic on the offensive line. And what always makes me sad about these lists is even with the top 20 and adding 3 or 4 on honorable mentions, we're still leaving about 20 other guys off that were absolute studs on the football field. I mean, I didn't put Evan Plagg on here, and Evan was a 3-year starter on offensive line and then goes over to Tulsa and has this great career at Tulsa, and Evan's not on my list. I don't know who I would set down as far as linemen to put him on the list, but that speaks to how many great linemen we've had. Dietrich Laws is not on my list. And you talk to most of the people, they would, from an athletic standpoint, Dietrich might have been the best athlete that's ever played football here as far as athleticism. He's just a freak. So there are people that I've left off. Believe me, I'm aware of, but there's only 20 spots. So that's
just
my
like
list.
If anybody else put a list together, they're going to leave somebody off just as well. So And I can't believe, Phil. I mean, my goodness, I think you're leaving one off. Whether he's in the top 20 or honorable mention, you got to at least mention him. I'm kind of surprised, Phil.
We're talking football right now, so that's a butt whipping I'm willing to take when I get off here. I mean, if I put my heart down there, I'd have. I mean, Ty would be on there. Michael would be on. But the reality is Michael was an extremely good high school football player. But sorry, son, you don't make the honorable mention list either.
Wow, Michael Harmon, Justin Chapel. I think you're still leaving someone off, and I don't think you're going. I don't think you're going to like yourself.
Who did I leave off?
Well, I don't think you're going to like yourself in the moment. I don't think you're going to like yourself after the show. You're going to have to explain something to somebody. Phil, I meant threw for over 1,600 yards his senior year.
Oh, are you talking about? Gosh, I just went blank. Great baseball player too.
Oh yeah, that's him.
Yeah. Why am I drawing a blank right now?
Yeah, well,
help me out.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to be calling you up.
He wouldn't be on
quick.
He can call me up because he's not on my list. I don't think he deserves to be on my list, but he's a great player. I mean, great player. Why can I not remember his name?
I'm kind of enjoying this, actually.
I know you are. That's why you're bleeding it out for everybody. But geez, you're killing me right now. I can't remember it. Sister's name's Rachel. I can't draw the last name to save my life right now.
Sister's name Rachel. Maybe we're talking about two different people. Oh, you're talking. No, you're talking about Reed Roberts. You're talking about Reed Roberts. You're talking about Reed Roberts, who was 14-0.
Right. And was a great baseball player, was an extremely good high school football player.
Yep.
I just realized who.
Yep.
Yeah, I hate myself.
Yep. So who you taking off your top 20 list? Yeah, that's right, Douglas. Yeah. I'll tell you.
You know what? I always tell. No, don't tell me. I know you're talking about Haji.
Yeah, 2004.
Wait, I always tell Haji that he's the sixth best quarterback that's ever played at Guthrie. So, I would add Haji to my. I mean, he had a great high school career in multiple sports, but and then went on to college and had a good baseball career. But Haji doesn't make my top 20. Sorry.
Well, can you at least make your honorable mention?
No, yeah, he'd be honorable mention, absolutely. Okay. And actually, I would probably put. I'm not going to go down that road. There'd be a lot of people on the honorable mention, but no, Haji would be on. You thought he was going to be in my top 20, didn't you?
I thought you at least mentioned his name, Phil.
Well, gosh darn it!
Keep talking your way out. I like this part.
All right. Chris wins again.
My favorite thing about Hodge, of course, everyone on the football field will talk about his 40 carries against the Douglas Trojans in a victory in the all-white uniforms.
Yours is a big
but, yeah, one of the greatest state tournament performances I've ever seen from not only a Guthrie Blue Jay player, but anybody that ever wear a uniform. And I've broadcast state baseball games. I've umpired state tournament baseball games. It's one of the greatest performances I've ever seen over a couple of days. I still to this day see the ball flying out of Sand Springs down the left field with the sun settling down there. I'll never forget those moments. It was just unbelievable. Every time he got up there, you just knew he was going to get a hit, and most of the time he did. It was amazing to watch him in that state tournament over at Sand Springs.
Well, and as you know, oh boy, as you know. Hodge was my nominee to be inducted in the Hall of Fame a couple years ago.
Oh, now, okay, here we go. Yeah.
Well, he was. Was he not?
My nominee. Okay.
Was he not? Was I not the one that brought up his name? Was I not the one that said my nominee this year is Hodge? Is that not true? Or as we affectionately call him, Mr. Chappell? Is that not? I mean, he was. He was my guy
for the Hall of Fame.
But, yeah, they're obviously a Hall of Famer, I'll have to buy Hodge lunch for the rest of my life now after this. So thanks, Chris. But,
Yeah.
So do you think there's anybody else I left off that was obvious that I just messed up with?
No, I think you did a really good job. I think you did a good job.
Okay.
There's always going to be some arguments somewhere along. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, but here's another name, and it was a punter. But how about J-Bo Hensley? I mean, he never got a whole lot of action, but when he did,
kick the ball, the quickest kicker I've ever seen. As far as kicking the ball, he could do it quicker than anybody. And people always forget about J-Bo because he was surrounded by all these all-time greats. The guy is a great baseball player. Would have been any other team would have been a 1 or 2 receiver. Could have started on the defensive backfield for any other team. I mean, he was just a stud. And now, as an adult, he's a freaking scratch golfer. I mean, he's just a great athlete. So J-Bo, J-Bo's a freak athlete, but there's so many of them out there. I mean, I didn't mention Michael Harmon, right? Who's had a great high school career. Jack Dumas, who I think is one of the best linebackers, one of the fastest linebackers ever to play at Guthrie. I mean, there's just so many great players we didn't mention.
You can't. It's a rule. You can't say Harmon, Dumas without Chapel. I mean,
that's true. That is true.
The trio. Yeah, they're kind of together.
Justin was a great linebacker in his own right. Also, I mean, big time. And then the other one, the other kid that I just loved to watch play, and unfortunately because of injuries, really didn't get to see it, but had a tremendous game. I believe as a sophomore in 2002 was Josh Chappell. I mean, Josh was a great football player, and of course had that bad knee injury in that year that we'd all like to forget in Guthrie.
2004.
So many tragedies happened, but Josh was another great one. His little brother Jaden Chappell, three-year starter for the Blue Jays, great football player, always found his way to the action and would give him a little extra when he needed to. So Jaden's one of my all-time favorites too. But just a lot of great players. We're so fortunate to have watched that run. You know, people, one thing I do have to say is, you know, people in high school sports right now, and we're experiencing some of that in Guthrie right now. Is that better? Yes. They say, you know, they'll say, well, you know, you talk about Rafe's record, and then immediately people start comparing it to Kelly Beebe, and I always start laughing, and I go, well, trust me, if Kelly Beebe had some of the names that we just mentioned in the bulk of his career, yeah, his numbers would look very similar to Rafe's. Trust me. You know, it is still about the Jimmies and Joes. You got to have the freaks out there. You know, you and I have said this in 5A football. If you got 2 outstanding, skilled kids and some really good kids, you're going to compete for a state title. In 2007, they had 10 of them. In 2002, they had multiples of them. In 2011, they had multiples of them. And in 2013, they had multiples of them. Well, gee, we won state those years. I mean, so you got to have freakishly good players to win state titles. And nothing against our kids that because they're giving you everything they got, but you know, we haven't had a DeMarco or a Kai or a Keaton or a Dante or a Josh or a Iffy or any other names I've mentioned in several years come through here. So.
Yeah, another one that Ryan Cotty mentioned, I think, will be definitely on there. And I didn't get to see him play, but I've heard a lot about him. And Neil Galbraith, I've heard a lot of things about him, so he would definitely be on that list. And you're right, Phil. It is all about the players. You know, we get to do a lot of state championship games throughout the last couple of years, and in 5A this year, Carl Albert had a lot of stud players. I mean, and they're all young and they're all going to be good. McGinnis had a lot of good players as well, but they didn't have as many as Carl Albert. They had, you know, 2 or 3 really good. They had one stud, and they had some really good players around them. You got Brendan Walker on the defensive side that played a little bit of offense. You got a lineman that is going to be a walk-in at OU. They got a good quarterback. Carl Albert had all that plus more.
Oh,
so
yeah. I mean, they were
Jimmy's
3-4 deep at running back. Yeah, it's about the Jimmies and Joes. And I mean, it's, you know, and one thing I got to say too, is, you know, there was that year, and I don't remember, was it 11 or was it 13 when we had the whole debacle with the OSSAA? And was that 11?
Yeah, that was
that 13?
Yeah, it was 11.
People forget this. just to remind everybody, the guy that stepped in and was the head coach, his name was Kelly Beebe through that playoff run. So you know, I mean, it's and it had a lot of help from Scott Mick, obviously, and a lot of other players. But Kelly was the guy that was handed the baton when that happened. So, you know, it's in high school football, you can't go recruit as much as some of us would like to. Some days, but you know, it's about the players.
Okay, I got 2 trivia questions for you as we wrap up our podcast here tonight, and it's been a good one here. And we'll make this a separate podcast from the other ones. I think a lot of people like to hear your list. But Kai Staley went to Oklahoma State University on a football scholarship. What was the other school that it came down to for Kai? OSU and
Arkansas.
That's correct.
Arkansas.
I don't. Good. You mentioned
he almost switched his verbal.
Yes, he did.
I mean, he was close to switching his verbal.
Yes, I remember. It's one of the. It was just when podcasting kind of got started. I interviewed Kai during a home basketball game, and we were talking about the decision. And boy, you put that on the Arkansas and LSU. What are those called? Those pages. Message boards. Message boards.
Yes, yeah.
And I was popular for about a couple of days there as they were trying to decide where Kai was going to go, either OSU or Arkansas. That's why he had a big signing day too. But anyway, my other trivia question for you, Phil. You mentioned the 2011 season when Guthrie went in front of the OSSAA because of the rule violation that was ruled to end the season, and then obviously it got overturned and Guthrie played. What team did Guthrie play in the first round of playoffs on the following day, because they couldn't play on Friday because of the ruling came down late? Who did Guthrie play in the first round of playoffs in 2011?
Was it an East Side school?
Well, first round game, so it would be a West Side school.
First. I'm sorry.
And here's a hint. It was a day game, a very rare day game.
Well, was that? That was Shawnee.
No, not Shawnee.
No, Shawnee was second round, weren't they? Or was that 13 when we played them?
That would have been 13. A very good Shawnee team, by the way.
Okay. I don't know. Can't remember.
It was not a real good game for the visiting team. 53-7 was the final score that day. It was a day game, and it was against the Durant Lions. Who, by the way,
I do remember.
I think they jumped out to a 7-0 lead, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, that was short-lived.
Yes,
that 11 team was. You know, we always get caught up in the 0-2 and 7 discussion. And if I'm a kid on that 11 team or 13 team, I'm going, hey, excuse me, we're sitting right over here, you know. And it's, you know, in that 11 team, if I had to rank them, it'd be 7, 2, 11, 13 is how I would rank them. But now all of them are great teams, but
sure.
But 11 was loaded. I mean, they were loaded, dude. I mean, absolutely loaded. You go back and look on that 11 team, there's, I believe there's
Blake Belcher,
2, 3.
Well, on offensive line,
5 guys. There's 6 guys on my top 20. It's on that 11 team.
Well, I remember Blake Belcher. I remember Hayden Seifert on the left side. Malachi Galbraith was your center. And was Evan Plagg on the other side, on the right side of that offensive line?
I believe he was.
And I can't remember the right guard, but that was a pretty good offensive line too. Of course, you got Brian Dutton throwing it to Donovan Jordan and, you know, all the list of players. So Kai Collins.
Luke Davis.
Yeah.
You know, and another kid that we didn't mention tonight that wouldn't be on my list, but he was a great football player, but there's just so many good ones. John, gosh darn it.
Clark.
Terrible. Number 40, John Clark. Great all-around football player. Just could do it all. And then our favorite, one of our favorite, Trevor Blassigame's not on our list. Trevor was an absolute monster. Tiger. Well played. Trevor was all Mohawk, but
Yeah.
Trevor was a monster on the defensive side of the ball too. I mean, and we didn't put him on the list, but yeah, a lot of great players didn't make the list, including some of my sons. So I'll pay for that later, but it is what it is.
And we had some we have great coaches, great players. Yes. Maybe our next podcast we can talk about some of our super fans during those years. There was a lot of buses, there were a lot of signs, there were a lot of cowbells, there was a lot of super fans in the Guthrie. You had the Mohawk that you just talked about with Mr. Blasingame with the blue Mohawk, and the tailgating was all interesting.
Yeah, the Smitties up in the stands, everybody hit somebody.
Well, you had the Smedley the air horn. Was that Smedley?
Yeah, that was the little bus. Little bus was made a lot of trips, and there was a few of us that participated in all those fun activities. But the former administration wouldn't allow us to pull up on the field anymore after that 1 year. I think we got a little too rambunctious.
A lot of rules following those years.
A lot of rules. But yeah, great time. And I will say this, and I'm not going to disclose the coach, but I talked to a coach this evening that called me just to say, hey, what's up? And just to talk with the everybody been shut down. And he brought up this top 5 thing because, he had seen it. And he said, I said, well, explain to me, if you were going to argue the difference between 07 and 02, what would it be? And he goes, well, that's real simple. He goes, he said, I always ask him, is it the same coaching staffs? He goes, because 02 is not going to run against the 07 defense with BB in that 5 defense. He said, it was just, they wouldn't do it. And he said you'd split one guy out wide to cover their number 1 wide receiver on the 02 team.
Keenan.
And then after Keenan, you got DJ, you got Israel locked up with Keenan, which would be a great matchup. And then on the other side, you have DJ Hughes, who was a great cornerback. And I'm not going to say the kid's name, but the drop off was there. Now, all good players. I'm not being critical of those players, but he said that's coming from a coach that coached both teams. Actually, a coach that coached all 4 championship teams. So, it's always, for me, it's always interesting to talk. Now, they're smart guys. Nobody's going to pick a favorite. I mean, hell, I won't even pick one, and I wasn't a coach, obviously, but it's as far as players, but I genuinely do believe the 07 team would beat the 02 team. Now, I'm not saying they'd run them off the field. They wouldn't, but it would be a great ball game. But
too many weapons. Too many weapons in 07. DeMarco Jones was good, but you just put 2 or 3 guys to DeMarco Jones, and then you stop him, and you have Israel or Dante or Kai on help on Keenan Webb, and so it's not. It's just fair. It's not fair, but to do that. But so many weapons in 07. And real quick, Al Vick mentioned the 07 football season, talking about 06 being one of their good defensive team, and I was like, of course that was a semifinal team for the Blue Jay season that year. Got beat by Lawton Mack down at OU.
Boston Norman, and really we only had one bad series.
Yeah, got down 14-0.
Catch up the rest of the game. Yeah, got down 14-0, and then we battled back. But no, I agree with you, Al. I think that 06 team, 06 graduating class of 07, that's one of the teams I have always felt was as good as anybody in the state. And I think that 09 graduating class 09 was as good of a football team as anybody in the state. So, there's been some great teams.
When Al mentioned that 06 team, I was like, I look over there. Again, this was the state semifinal team. Here's the points they allow each week defensively: 7, 7, 7, 6, 0, 0, 0, 0, 21, 0, 7, 15, 12. So that's pretty good defensive numbers.
Not too bad. What was 07's or 08's defensive numbers? Are you talking about the 07 championship team?
That was the 06 team.
Now read off the 07's numbers defensively.
10, 0, 0, 0, 0, 7, 0, 0, 21, 0, 0, 34, 14, 3.
Right. And then read off their offensive numbers from 07.
Shawnee put 34 points on Guthrie that year in the second round playoffs. Of course, Guthrie put 61 on them too. But The 07 numbers, it was a good game for a half. The 07 numbers offensively were 42, 62, 58, 68, 69, 51, 69, 69, 24, 69, 61, 61, 45, and 15.
Yeah. Now, real quick, just to wrap this up, tell me 02's numbers.
02 defensively?
Sure, we'll do defense and offense.
Defense 25, 8, 41, 6, 0, 10, 7, 13, 19, 12, 13, 20, and 13. Offensively,
very respectful. They gave up 41. Yep.
Offensively, they scored 14, 47, 14, 41, 51, 63, 38, 43, 35, 22, 29, 27, 23, 16. Again, I will say
lies
this.
The reason. Go ahead.
I will say this, though. I will say this here real quick. That 02 playoff run with Ardmore, Tulsa Central, Chickasha, Booker T, Washington is stacked. That's stacked.
No, that's the best playoff run ever as far as competition.
Absolutely.
And the thing I would say about the 02 team, Chris, also had the best offensive and defensive lines that I think I've ever seen at Guthrie.
Yeah.
Just dominant. Absolutely dominant. All right, brother. We got to get off here because Tyler Frederick, our friend buddy T. Fred's throwing, throwing stats out. Well, what I want to say, T. Fred, is
here it comes. You know what? I didn't even have to bring this up to Phil. He's going to do it on his own. Go ahead, Phil.
But I do remember us slamming the door in 08 football season on Bishop McGinnis' winning streak. I believe they were a 2-time defending state champion when they came into our house week 1. And I believe we beat them. Was it 20-0? I think we shut them out, didn't we?
21-3, Phil.
21-3. Yeah, so T. Fred, I do remember that.
Keep going,
I don't
Phil.
remember what you're talking.
Keep going.
I can't. I love T. Fred. I can't. I got to stop. I got to get off.
Hey, that 21-3 ball game, Gabe Eichert got blown up by Josh King. I bet he still feels that.
Josh King, 165 pounds. Gabe Eichert at that time probably 230, and his head hit before his butt did.
He sure did. That was awesome. T. Fred, we love you, buddy. Great McGinnis supporter, great McGinnis coach. Thank you, T. Fred. We always enjoy having fun with you.
Now, T. Fred did just add, that was the same night when the mascot got arrested from McGinnis.
He sure did.
You're right.
I got pictures, and that was before news page days, and I still got a picture of that crime scene of the McGinnis mascot. So we are out of here. Thank you to T. Fred and all of our great listeners and viewers out there. Thank you for all the great feedback as well. For Phil Nichols, I'm Chris Evans. We'll talk to you next time on the Open Mic Podcast.